The first ever Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championships were held in August of 2003, being a historical moment in the game not just in its presence, but also in its metagame. The event itself made it apparent to everyone playing at the time that Beatdown was going the way of the dodo, and that a new deck type was king in town. I'm the Law Yugioh, this is Retro Retrospective, and today we jump back to August of 2003 with Yata format.
Psst, hey, real quick, did you know that only about 20% of people who watch my content are subscribed? If you like what you see, leave a like, comment, and subscribe below. Thanks, it really does help a lot.
With the time since Android, we've had 2 main sets, 2 starter decks, and a video game of all things that have brought significant changes to the card pool. With that in mind, let's tackle the pool changes before the ban list this time to help keep things in order a bit better. Moving chronologically, starter decks Joey and Pegasus brought mostly reprints of cards from previous sets, but each did bring one card that would significantly affect the game in Scapegoat and Graceful Charity. Scapegoat at this stage would not be as popular as it would eventually become, being able to summon out 4 level 1 tokens to eat attacks for you. Graceful Charity, on the other hand, was instantly a staple, able to let you draw 3 and discard 2, allowing a player to essentially craft their hand in a way never seen before. This would be even more powerful when combined with the promos released in Stairway to the Destined Duel, a Game Boy Advance game that came with 3 promo cards, being Valkyrion the Magna Warrior, Sinister Serpent, and Harpy's Feather Duster. Serpent would jump out for its use alongside Graceful Charity as it essentially made your discard costs free, adding itself from grave to hand every standby phase. Duster would also instantly become staple out of this, wiping all spells and traps the opponent controlled, becoming the Raigeki equivalent for back row. As for main sets, Legacy of Darkness was released in June 2003, and with it would come the beginning of a shift in the paradigm of the metagame. Up until this point, beatdown style strategies were mostly considered to be the most effective, even when they had shifted to tomato control in Android format, but this set began to shift truly towards the dominance of hand control with Yata Garasu. Yata was a member of a new mechanic known as Spirit Monsters, which return to the hand at the end of the turn they're summoned, which usually would be a downside, but considering Yata's low stats could actually be considered beneficial to prevent removal. When Yata deals battle damage, it prevents the opponent from drawing the following turn, which means if you damage your opponent with Yata, unless they have a way to deal with it already in hand or on field, the game is essentially over, as Yata will lock them from gaining any further resources, or perform the Yata lock, as it's known in the community. This interaction is the backbone of this particular format, as many cards released with these sets are based on the idea of controlling what resources your opponent has access to, leading to the popularity of hand control decks. This set also brought the beginnings of the Warrior Toolbox in the form of Exiled Force, Marauding Captain, and Reinforcements of the Army. Exiled Force is essentially a monster removal spell thanks to the ability to trigger his effect with priority in the format. Marauding Captain lets you special summon another warrior from hand on summon, which could form an attack lock by summoning another copy of itself thanks to its battle targeting effect. Rhoda lets you search any level 4 or lower warrior in your deck, being arguably one of the best search spells ever printed thanks to the eventual depth of that particular pool of monsters. Dark Ruler Hades was another 1 tribute option that negates the effects of anything it destroys in battle, useful for removing floating effects. Spear Dragon matched Gemini Elf's 1900 attack, but in addition dealt piercing damage, having the same defense mode swap downside as Goblin Attack Force. Fiber Jar was another annoying flip monster to add to the Jar series, effectively resetting every aspect of the game except for life points and banished cards. Twin-Headed Behemoth brings itself back from grave once per duel, making its attack and defense 1000, but its once per duel restriction is once per copy, making it a bit of a rulings nightmare if it ever got returned to the deck. To help alleviate this, the card was limited, so there's only 1 copy ever in question. Azura Priest is another spirit monster, like Yata, who can attack every monster once each, making it an ideal monster for removing recruiters like Mystic Tomato, as you can attack every monster it summons too. Injection Fairy Lily, for the cost of 2,000 life points, can boost her attack by 3,000 for a battle, making it larger than any non-modified attack value in the game at the time. Smoke Grenade of the Thief was an equipped spell that hand-ripped a card from the opponent when destroyed by a card effect, making it useful with Gearfried the Iron Knight for hand control. Creature Swap let you and your opponent give each other one monster from your fields, commonly used to give the opponent a floating monster, then run it over for the benefits. Royal Oppression, for the cost of 800 life points per negate, allows both players to negate a special summon or an effect that special summons while face up. Bottomless Trap Hole acts like a souped up version of the previous Trap Hole, requiring the monster to have 500 more attack, but could also respond to special summons and banishes the target. Drop Off is a trap that forces the opponent to discard whatever they drew for turn, which helps with hand control strategies. Lastly for Laud, Last Turn is the card that sparked a million rulings nightmares. The way it's supposed to work is your opponent summons a monster from their deck to fight a monster you control, and the last monster standing wins the entire duel. In reality, the card has a million different ways it can go wrong in the application of its effect. So much so that more often than not, it's played to cheese out a win or draw in some weird gimmick. Moving into Pharaonic Guardian, released in July 2003, more pieces of the format would fall into place. Starting with the monsters, Dawn Zalug and Spirit Reaper are new additions to the hand control strategy, with both being summonable by Mystic Tomato and Spirit Reaper specifically also being able to avoid battle destruction, but also dies if it's targeted by anything. King Tiger Wanghu is a bit of a counter to various hand control strategies, destroying any monster summoned with 1400 or less attack. Dark Dust Spirit is yet another spirit monster that destroys all other face-up monsters when summoned, being like a pseudo dark hole on legs that can be repeatedly summoned if you have the tribute fodder. The makings of Pac-Man are here as well, in Swarm of Scarabs, Swarm of Locusts, and Deslacuta, able to destroy monsters, spells and traps, or draw a card when flip summoned respectively. The start to zombie strategies is also here in Pyramid Turtle and Book of Life, being a recruiter for zombies with 2000 or less defense, and a monster reborn for zombies that also banishes a monster from the opponent's grave. The first true archetype in the game in the form of Gravekeepers is here with Gravekeeper Spy, which summons another Gravekeeper from deck when flipped, Necro Valley, which locks almost all graveyard effects, and Royal Tribute, which hand rips all monsters from the opponent's hand if you control Necro Valley. Lava Golem is a 3000 attack monster you can summon to your opponent's field by tributing 2 monsters they control, dealing 1000 to them every turn it stays on field. Really useful for removing multiple threats, but in this format it is a bit unnecessary. Book of Moon is a new Swiss Army knife style spell that does so much more than it says on the card, being able to flip any monster face down on a quick play spell, which can be used for battle disruption, flip effect resetting, targeting disruption in some cases, and setup for cards like Noblemen of Crossout. Mirage of Nightmare lets you draw until you have 4 cards in your hand in your opponent's standby phase, but you have to discard the same amount randomly in your next standby phase. This downside could also be circumvented by destroying Mirage before your standby phase came thanks to being a continuous spell, so it was common to cheat the draw effect with no drawbacks. Reasoning let you summon a random monster from the top of your deck, but if your opponent calls the level right, it goes to grave instead. Terraforming is a search spell for literally any field spell, which would eventually become extremely problematic as field spell design philosophy changed. Metamorphosis lets you cheat the fusion mechanic by tributing a monster of the same level, which would be fairly unpopular until later formats. Ring of Destruction could remove any monster from either field and burn both players for its attack value, which was commonly used to either win the game or force a draw. Needle Sealing destroyed all face-up monsters on the field if there were 4 or more out, useful in decks specializing in face-down monsters. Trap Dust Shoot let you see the opponent's hand and spin a monster back if they had 4 or more cards in it, which was an extremely powerful going first option in the format. Reckless Greed let you draw 2 cards, but skip your next 2 draw phases, which could all be used together to reduce the downside, as the downside did not stack. Lastly, Raigeki Break is a single target spot removal for the cost of a discard, versatile in its abilities. As you can probably tell, with the card pool changing so much with a lot of new powers being added, the ban list would be adjusted too to compensate. Being limited on this go around were Exiled Force, Fiber Jar, Injection Fairy Lily, Sinister Serpent, Twin-Headed Behemoth, Yata, Graceful Charity, Harpy's Feather Duster, Heavy Storm moving up from 2, Mirage of Nightmare, Reckless Greed, and Ring of Destruction. Semi-limited were Marauding Captain, Creature Swap, Rhoda, and Last Turn. Finally, Backup Soldier and Limiter removal were removed from the list as their time had passed. With all of that covered, what's the deck to play in the format? Unsurprisingly, it's hand control. There are just too many good options for hand control to dominate with in this particular format to pass up on, as they have Yata, Reaper, Salug, the Hand Rip trio, as well as plenty of draw options in Pot, Graceful, and Mirage that it's just too good to not play. Most of your games in this format are going to be mirror matches, but there are a couple of off-the-wall decks you could try, like Gearfried, taking advantage of the searchability of warriors with Rhoda and the raw stats of Gearfried and Zombira the Dark, or Pac-Man, short for Pure Advantage Camels Munch All Noobs, which focuses around the resource control with Deslakuta and the Swarm monsters. Here are a couple lists to get you started in the format, such as Elita Can's Hand Control, Alpha Ya 2's Gearfried, and Juve 89's Hand Control, all from recent FormatLibrary tournaments. With that, Yata format would come and go, shaping the future of what decks are meta staples with hand control. This would lead into early 2004, where a couple of sets would once again change the field with powerful new additions to deck variety.